Welcome to the Monday Morning Critic Podcast. This is episode 170 with film score composer Dustin O'Halloran. Dustin's filmography includes Lion. He won an Emmy for Transparent. His first opportunity came with Sofia Coppola and Marie Antoinette. Dustin has also worked with Katy Perry, the late, great, and his friend Jóhann Jóhannsson. He has scored the Nike commercials that featured Colin Kaepernick, the ones that were very popular, I want to say a few years back. So Dustin's done some pretty fantastic work. He is considered by most to be one of the best composers on the planet, including yours truly. Most interviews on the Monday Morning Critic Podcast drop, in fact, on Monday, usually late Monday or late Sunday night. Thank you so much for continuing to listen. If you want to get a hold of me on Twitter, it's MDM Critic. On Instagram, it's Monday Morning Critic. My website is mmcpodcast.com. That's mmcpodcast.com. If you want to drop me an email, it's mondaymorningcritic@gmail.com. Interviews can be found on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio. There's so many places they're located. Everywhere there's podcasts, you'll find the Monday Morning Critic Podcast. And finally, I have to say, I really have worked hard just getting guests that not only move me, but I think that you guys would find interesting, from composers to actors to directors to trailblazers, people that really have changed not only my world, but the world itself. In a time where there's so many podcasts out there, and that's both a good and a bad thing. It's good because you hear an eclectic bunch of voices and takes, and people come from different perspectives, which is great. But on the other hand, you also have a lot of fluff and stuff that just is borderline unlistenable, and hopefully this is not that. But I do work very, very hard putting together a product that I really believe that I would listen to if it wasn't me on this side of the microphone. I certainly believe it. My guest quality, starting from episode 1 to now we're at 170, I think is just truly amazing. And I would put my guest list against any podcast on the planet, and that includes some of the podcasts you see in the top 5 on the iTunes charts. I would put my guest quality against that, and I'm not being arrogant or conceited. It's just I feel like my hard work in getting some pretty special people on the podcast to come on and just chat with me and just kind of we look at things from different perspectives. I spend a lot of time formulating, researching, and getting innovative questions. It's really important to me, and I hope that translates in my interviews. And I really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for listening to my podcast, for continuing to come back when new episodes are dropped. I really appreciate it. Without wasting any more of your time, here is a film composer, the very talented, the very kind, Dustin O'Halloran. My next guest is an award-winning composer. His work in Lion is one of the most stunning, emotionally driven soundtracks I've ever heard in my life. Please welcome Dustin O'Halloran. Dustin, thank you for being on the show today.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So there's so much to your life. I mean, for the sake of your sanity, I think I've broken it down a little bit. So you're born in Arizona, and you spend a lot of time between Hawaii and LA. Do I have that part right?
Yeah, my father had a scuba dive business in Kauai, and my mom lived in Los Angeles, and so I was always splitting my time between the two.
Yeah, and your mom, you've kind of always been, when I did research on your life, Dustin, you've always been surrounded by the arts, I feel like. It's always been a big part of your life. Does it start, I know a lot of things you read online say self-taught, and I completely believe that, but I also read something about, you learned playing a little bit at the church. And so how does your love kind of formulate in the early goings? How does that take place?
Yeah, well, I had some just like early lessons in church from the church organist. It was my mom's church, and she was just really supportive in letting me actually compose and get into that. And I was just learning the basics, but the real part of me learning to play the piano was when I was on my own, and I really just studied, and where I really sort of had to really teach myself to actually play. I don't really consider myself a pianist, really, even though I use a piano a lot in my compositions. I've never really thought of myself as a pianist, because I feel like that that's a space for, the Glenn Goulds of the world. And that's not really what drives me. I'm not looking to be a virtuoso piano player. I use it as an instrument. So for better or for worse, my playing is limited, and that maybe is reflected in my compositions in some way, but I just try to learn as much as I can. And I really tried to teach myself as much as I could. But I love the instrument as a way to compose, but I also use a lot of other instruments as well, and have composed for orchestra and electronics. I mean, it's sort of whatever is around or whatever I can get my hands on, really.
Yeah, and I have to say, when it comes to scores and movie scores, I am really good about knowing who does what. But as far as the nuts and bolts of it, I'm weak, to say the least. And I have to say, though, from putting it all together, doing the research on your life, one of your strong points, and there are many, is your gift of interpretation, your gift of putting your own touch on things. Is that a fair way of interpreting what I read? Is that fair, Dustin?
Yeah, I think I've always searched for a way to make my own sound or feel that I was, and I think part of it it's not just the composition. I've always recorded my own music, and I had a band for a long time with a singer named Sara Lov, and we called our project Devix, and we ended up recording for a British label called Bella Union that puts out records like Fleet Foxes and Beach House, and we did a lot of touring. And I always recorded. I was always involved in the recording a lot and creating the sounds and finding ways to record things. And so I think a big part of how I approach recording is also part of making things sound like me in a way as well. So that's the production and is sort of been hand in hand with the composition, because it's about finding the sounds that I like that give also that portray another layer than just the music, which I think subconsciously everyone responds to that, but a lot of people don't, maybe they don't think about it. But if you take you could take the same piano piece and record it on a Steinway in one of the most beautiful studios, and you could record it on a cheap upright with cheap microphones and a little bit of felt, and the one that may get a more emotional response may be the cheap upright. So there's some fragility and confidence and all of these things that are translated through the recording. Sometimes you need the bass, sometimes you need the power of like something fine, a fine instrument and a beautiful room, and sometimes you don't. And sometimes it actually works against the piece. So I think I've always been producing as well as composing, and for me they go very much hand in hand.
Yeah, and you're clearly original and authentic in your pieces, and there's a few that I really want to kind of touch on here, because people that are listening to this are going to recognize them for sure. But I have to say, so from my end, when I think of something funny or I'm doing an interview, I'm like, there's no way, and it kind of gets like a laugh or whatever. I'm like, there's no way I thought of that. I feel like I heard it somewhere else, and subconsciously, it came to me like it's somebody else's words, somebody else's joke. As a composer, I almost feel like if I was a composer, I feel like I would have, because I'm a Thomas Newman fan, I'm a fan of you, I'm a fan of so many others. I feel like if I was a composer, I would subconsciously, not intentionally, but use somebody else's, a little bit of their riff, a little bit of their piece. Is it tough on your end being not original, because you clearly are, but do you have to, because I've had composers on before and they say that's a little bit of a struggle with them. Is it hard to kind of ignore pieces you've heard before? Because I've read a lot of your stuff, and you're respectful of a lot of the composers that came before you, whether they score movies or they're pianists, whatever. You're very respectful of that. But how do you separate their influence, their pieces, from what you're doing now? Does that make any sense, or am I blabbering?
Well, I think it's about, I think it's a difference between, I don't think that when I'm scoring films, I'm looking at other film scores. I'm looking to like experimental music. I'm looking to, farther Baroque music, romantic music, Debussy, or, I think, I listen to so much different music, and I think that it's such an accumulation of all of those things. And sometimes I just don't listen to music at all, and I just sort of experiment. Every music is always a lineage of information that moves forward. I think that it's just how you distill it. Chopin wouldn't exist without Mozart, and all of these things that you're referencing other past music all the time. Everybody does that. I think it's just how you distill it. It's not about copying. It's about distilling it and letting the DNA come into you. And I think that's that just happens naturally. I think,
I feel like I phrased that poorly. Like, it sounds like I'm saying copy. It's not what I meant. But like, I guess influence is a better word. So like when you listen to something, yeah. But what you're saying makes much more sense. Like the way you're phrasing it makes much more sense.
Yeah, the work that Morricone did in the 60s and the 70s, his orchestrations are so clever, and you kind of get to study things like that and understand like why it works and what's interesting about it. And then maybe you distill it and you use some fragment of that later. But I think that's all, his work is based a lot on counterpoint, and probably was influenced a lot by Bach, and Bach was influenced by early music. And, there's just so many, Debussy, there's a famous story of him, experiencing this gamelan concert from Bali at the World's Fair in Paris. And there were like 20 people there, and it was Ravel, it was Debussy, all these people, and it just sort of changed their, it was the first time they heard this sort of harmonic drone-y instrument, and it had a huge influence on the music of that period. And so I think, now it's an age of hyper input, and I think, but it's music.
Yeah.
I think you just have to follow, your instincts. And I think, I think we're always a thread in a much larger woven fabric. So I think to think anybody is like inventing anything is sort of ridiculous. I think we're just all in it together.
No, that's well said. That's really well said. And looking at your life, there's tons of people that refer to your music and you as an artist as, brilliant, captivating, profound. Does that ever get overwhelming? Does that, do you feel like you always have to live up to that? Or is it just, what, I'll do my thing. What people want to say about me is up to them. But I just honestly, I wouldn't bring that up because I feel like it's a very easy comment to kind of say to somebody that I'm interviewing, but it's true. With you, I felt like it came up a lot. Like the words describing your ability, they were overwhelmingly positive, and the words were very not only complimentary, but I feel like just really putting you in a category of your own.
Well, I'm honored that people think that. I think we are artists are always there. We're our own harshest critics, and I go through different phases of liking moments of my music, and then feeling that I, want to grow and do better, do different things. But I just try to follow the muse, and I try to protect it, and I try to make sure that I'm exploring and going deep into the work, and I'm glad that people can connect with it, and I connect with a lot of other artists' work. So I think that I think I never think of myself as exceptional in respect to how many other great artists there are. I think it's just if you're translating a form of genuine emotion, then I think that's all you can hope for.
So I have to say, I found myself, I mentioned this a lot, I'm on the treadmill, and my playlist, you are at the very top. One of the songs that moves me beyond belief is Atomos 7. I don't think, like, it's embarrassing because there's this big fat guy crying on a treadmill listening to this song, but like it moves me, like, and I'm gonna get into context about why a little bit later, outside of the fact it's just a stunning piece. But are you ever moved? And this is gonna sound like I'm asking you to, like, if you're arrogant about your own music, but did you ever get? And I know in Lion you kind of did, but that was a collaborative effort in a different kind of situation. But are you ever moved so much by something that you create that, not that you're like me and overwhelming, but are you ever moved to tears? Are you ever moved to, like, my God, that fits, that works?
Well, I think that when you're making music, that's sort of when if you're truly feeling it, then yeah, I mean, that's sort of I don't think making music that is moving others is meant is made in a feelingless vacuum. So right. I think you get emotional, you find these things, and I think that's when you're on the right track, is when you're feeling it yourself. And that's sort of my barometer of when I follow something, when I start to really feel it in my body, then I feel that I'm going in the right direction. That's
it's almost like it's almost like a self barometer, Dustin. Is that a fair way of, like? Yeah,
I mean, I think a lot of artists are in touch with that, and I think that it can get kind of, I don't know. This is where things, I think, get a little bit maybe esoteric, is when when you feel like you're channeling a beautiful piece of music, you feel like a channel less than a person that's in control of it. And I think that that's the emotional level of music, is being able to just sort of be a channel to it and know when you're feeling it, and to keep digging into that space. I don't know. I listen back to pieces of music sometimes, and I don't really understand where it came from. I don't write in this sort of very conscious, it's more of a subconscious way. So, I think that's sort of the difference between film work and writing for myself. Is film work is a much more conscious, the decisions are much more conscious, and they have to be, because they're dealing with a story, and there's more parameters that you have to work in. There's edits and dialogue, and there's a lot of things that have to work around it. So you can't just kind of go off into like a subconscious space and just write exactly what you want to write. So it's a challenge to, like, bring that to film. I think Lion was a real exception, because most of that music was written not to picture. So we ended up doing a few things to picture, but a lot of it was just sort of written in a different space, and bringing a lot of real emotions that Volker and I connected with. He was the Volker Bertelmann scored that with me, and we just kind of we were kind of digging and excavating our souls a little bit for that film, much more than most films. And the thematic, and the film had such a resonating sort of real emotion. I can't tell you how many people wrote to me when that film came on an airplane. I think there's something about airplanes, just people just cry a lot more on airplanes than they do. And I had so many people text me and say they were stuck in the bathroom because they had just their puffy eyes from crying, or that movie came on and they got embarrassed because they were crying uncontrollably, so they had to go to the bathroom. But that was an effect of the story and the music together. The story is just such a powerful, real story, and the music together. So I mean, it worked really well, and it doesn't always happen like that. So I was, that was a special one for me.
Yeah, believe me, I have a few questions about Lion, but I have to say, why you mentioned it, there's, once, Atomos 7 enters, and then you kind of see the train track scene, and then it pans out. I mean, at that point, I think I'm crying so hard I might be close to being unconscious. Like, I just... But I'm going to get into the importance of it's just beautiful. But I have to ask you a couple terms. So when you say to picture, that means you've seen the movie obviously without any music, and then and you guys decide, okay, this would go here, this goes there. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion on how the music has to be shaped, and a lot of it is a lot of it is based on just discussions with the director, and if we've created something, sometimes it just works, and it sort of shifts the scene. There's a lot of back and forth, but that film particularly, the best way to make the film feel authentic was to watch the film and then write, not looking at the film, because I felt like looking at the film would make me want to write to the film, and what really needed to happen was that the music was just coming from us, from a really genuine place, and that combined would be effective. And so Garth really pushed us, was like trying to really push us to go there, to really give a lot of ourselves and to find these subtle, these really subtle emotions that you can't always just pull up on command. So.
And it's amazing because, and I'm not just saying this, I'm speaking with you, but that score is not only one of the best I've heard in the last decade, last 10 years, 15 years, but it's so nice, I imagine from your point of view, to have a director that is so pro score and not just, create some music and go on your way, but appreciates music, appreciates, what goes on in the soundtrack. Like that, to me, if you're a composer, that's got to mean the world to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was one of my favorite films I got to work on because of that. It gave it so much space and really helped push us there. So it was definitely, it's not always like that.
And the other term I wanted to ask you about, and I don't want to Google it because I feel like that was a cheap way out, but what does prepared piano mean? And I'm sorry if these questions sound like super basic, but like I feel like a lot of people hear them, but they don't actually know what they mean.
Well, Hauschka, Volker Bertelmann, who did the score with me, he's been working with prepared piano for most of his career. And prepared piano is basically putting objects and pieces inside the piano, between the strings and the hammer, inside the resonating board. It just turns the piano into a different sounding instrument than what it traditionally was meant for. And John Cage is sort of maybe the godfather of the prepared piano, but I'm sure before that there was probably people experimenting with it, but he's the one that kind of brought it to modern music.
Gotcha. And in 2004, you kind of released your first solo artist, piano solos. Then in 2011, you have a project that includes some pretty important people. There's a song, We Move Lightly, great song that's used in a Nike commercial. But you work with two people that are pretty, I don't want to say vital in your life because I'm not going to interpret what people mean to you, but I have to believe they are. One is Adam, and the epic and the absolutely phenomenal Jóhann Jóhannsson. Did I pronounce his name right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, and he is just phenomenal. So you have an opportunity there in 2011 to work with two people, that one of which, you continue to work with, the other of which is just an absolute icon when it came to movie scores, the very, the late, legendary Jóhann. Talk a little bit about those two people and how they impacted your life, not only in 2011, but moving forward, Dustin.
Well, I met Adam Wiltzie when I was living in Italy, and he was touring with a band called Sparkle Horse, and we met and became friends and ended up kind of sharing music. I moved to Berlin, and previous to moving to Berlin, I actually met Jóhann in London, and we became friends. And sort of simultaneously, Adam came out to Berlin, and we started working on some music together. We decided to give it a try. And I was finishing my solo record, Lumiere, and Jóhann mixed it for me, and we worked together a bit on that. And so, I mean, those have been big friendships and big musical friends and collaborators. I shared a studio with Jóhann Jóhannsson and Hildur Gudnadottir for 10 years in Berlin. And I just recently moved my studio from Berlin. And it was, a very important time. It was to be able to work with such great artists and be around each other. And Jóhann was an incredible composer. He was one of my best friends. It's a huge loss in my life, and I think for just musically. So it's hard to quantify that one. But
one of the very few people that he was an absolute legend, musically, but like I feel like as a human being he was just as good. And it's like, I'm so sorry for your loss. He just I think people still do. They love him to death, and it's just a huge loss. But you know what? And if there is a ray of hope here or light, it's the fact that his music will live on and people will be able to appreciate music from an absolute legend.
Yeah. Well, when he passed away, he had a concert booked in Spain for the Primavera Festival, and all of us and all the people who worked with him, we decided to play the concert for him in his honor. And so we had to compile all the music and sort of figure out how to play all the music and get everything together. And it was one of the most beautiful, moving concerts. And it was, I thought it was going to be a very sad moment, but it actually was so beautiful because I realized the way he constructed his music and he had so much of it notated that it can live on and other people can perform it. And we performed a really beautiful concert of his music without him. And I felt like, the thing that I realized with music is that when it's in the air and when it's happening, that person's spirit is evoked. And it was so strong. And to realize that his music can continue on is I think that it's very special and really unique. So
yeah, that's beautifully said, Dustin. I completely agree. And for those of you listening, if you're wondering about what some of Jóhann's work, just off the top of my head, Theory of Everything, Sicario, and Prisoners is one of the best soundtracks that I've heard, certainly. Absolute legend. I wish that happened more, Dustin. I wish, and we heard on Hans Zimmer. We did we went to a concert where they played the Game of Thrones, and I forget his name off the top of my head. But I wish composers would do that more. Like I wish you were on the East Coast, kind of doing just place to place. But obviously you're doing other projects. But I wish it happened more on a whole, where film score composers kind of brought. It is happening more. But I would love to sit in front of a Thomas Newman, whomever, and just listen to just like this legendary music. I hope it's picking up steam because I'm really cheering for it to pick up steam.
Well, my project, A Winged Victory for the Sullen with Adam, is going to be on tour in the U.S. in March and April. So
very cool.
Yeah, so you should, if you go to wingedvictoryforthesullen.com, you can get all of the dates. So,
and I have to say to you, I can promise you, if it's in within 1,000 miles of me, I promise you I will be there. I give you my word. I promise.
Let me know.
Yeah, and I have to say, so looking at that, so I looked at. I continually listening to the Lion soundtrack. How does that work? I was kind of confused with this because I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. Atomos 7 is one of the most powerful pieces I think I've ever heard, and it appears in the movie, not on the soundtrack. How does that work? Like just piecing that together. I know there's probably other things involved with it, but I have to say it's just such a great part because I feel like there's elements of that song in the movie and vice versa. Talk a little about that if you're able to.
Well, that's a piece that I wrote with Adam Wiltzie as A Winged Victory for the Sullen. So that was taken. That was an existing piece of music that we wrote for a dance piece for a choreographer named Wayne McGregor from London. He is the resident choreographer for the London Royal Ballet, and he also has a contemporary dance company that he's been doing for many, many years. And he uses that as a place to really experiment with ideas, and music is a big part of it. And he asked us to do this piece called Atomos. And it was based on the formation of atoms and inner space and outer space, and there was a lot of sort of big themes to it. And we wrote a 70-minute dance piece, and so that's taken from that.
Yeah, and it's really just the entire album. I keep singling out 7 only because I'm getting to Lion, but the entire album works really well. I mean, it's just the whole thing works. But your early start was with Sofia Coppola and Marie Antoinette. Was that an overwhelming way to kind of start? It's your first, and if I'm misspeaking, please correct me. It's your first real big introduction into film composing. Are you overwhelmed? Are you shocked? What are your feelings when you receive that kind of honor to do that? Yeah,
well, I mean, it was kind of out of the blue, and I was living in Italy at the time, and there wasn't, my solo work was just a very small blip in I just made one record, and it was just sort of it was an experiment, really. I was just wasn't even sure if I was going to release it, because I just didn't feel, I wasn't sure if I felt really confident about my playing and the recording, and I ended up just releasing it just kind of as I didn't really know where it was going to go. So I was a little bit surprised to get that call. And I had always really liked her movies a lot, especially the music. So I was inspired, and she sent me a book of photographs and a kind of lookbook and the story, and just all the mood that she was looking for. And so I just ended up just sort of writing a lot of music. A lot of that music ended up being my second solo record, because I just sat there and wrote so much music. Right. And then in the end, she just used a few pieces for her film, but it was nice. I mean, I got it was a good way to kind of start and understand, because her process was very different. She wanted all the music before she was filming, so she wanted to have all the music sort of understood what pieces she wanted before she was even filming, and that's pretty unusual. So it was I got lucky to just kind of experience that process, and then that was just sort of the starting point.
And I would have to mention for those listening that you had some work with Katy Perry early on as well. Do I have that factually correct?
Yeah, I mean, that was a couple of years ago. Wasn't that long ago. She asked me to produce a track off of her record, the last record she did, and it was a song she had written with this band called Hot Chip, and she just wanted to be. She really loved my records. It was like a genuine, just sort of like she loved my records and just wanted to see what I could do with it. And so I kind of accepted the challenge. I'd never really done anything like that before, and I just thought it could be fun. And yeah, it was fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I ended up sort of just reworking the whole piece of music and just figuring out what I could do with it. And she loved it, and I made the record. So
to me, yeah, I mean, to me, just looking from the outside, I mean, your work with her, we moved lightly. We talked about your work with Jóhann, and I know if I could ask him today what he thinks of you, I think the comments would be off the chart. I think he would say you're the talent that I know you to be. And it seems like you mentioned your band earlier. You're doing well in a lot of different areas, in a lot of different ways. I mean, that's to be eclectic, to be that, multifaceted. That can only benefit you moving forward, right, Dustin? To have that. I mean, again, I'm asking you to. I hope not be arrogant, but that's a good thing, right? That you could do this many different things, and I haven't even brought up Lion yet, which I'm going to gush over. But that's a great thing, Dustin, to be that. I don't know, that open to different things.
Well, I tried to, I like exploring different things, and I think that, I try to find my place in it, and there's probably things that I won't explore, but, yeah, I mean, I like challenges, and I think that I try to keep a thread of honesty of like what I'm doing, that it's, that I'm honest to like, to my path. But sometimes, you want to explore a little bit and get pushed a little bit. And, it's interesting. I learn things, and then I can take it back to my own music, and I love collaborating. Collaborating is just such, is such a fruitful endeavor when you have great collaborators, because you just learn so much, and it's one of my favorite things. So,
and I'm not sure every composer, and I love composers, I'm not sure every composer would say the same thing, and I think your mindset is the healthy mindset to have, that you're always learning, it's always a positive in that way. So that's how I feel anyway. So I know you have a respect for legends of the past. Is there a movie or two you've seen recently where you were blown away by the score?
I'm just trying to think of I really loved the score for A Ghost Story. I'm trying to remember his name.
Oh, it's Casey. Is that Casey Affleck? Do I have the right movie?
Yeah. It's Daniel Hart. I don't know, that one really stuck out for me. I thought that was a really great score. I don't know why it didn't get awards. But Mika Levy also, I mean, the score that she did for Under the Skin, I thought was just like, I don't know, that one like came out of nowhere, and it was a really powerful, interesting, minimalist score that was really effective. I think everybody really, I think she kind of, changed the game a little bit with that. And also I really loved Hildur Guðnadóttir's score that she just did for Joker. She's a dear friend of mine, yes. So I'm a little bit partial, but she's such an amazing artist, and I know how hard she works, and I was there when she was like working on a lot of that score, and I see how much she puts into it, and so I have an even greater appreciation for the depths of like where she goes. But I mean, here's her work on Chernobyl is amazing as well.
Yeah, like Chernobyl's an awesome example. Like Joker, it's a great example as well, because it's a phenomenal score, and it's like I almost feel like cinematography and scores are almost underappreciated, because her work in that movie really fuels it. It really kind of pushes it along. It really gives the movie some life. I don't know. I just feel like it's a cinematography and soundtracks are kind of, specifically scores, are kind of underappreciated, if I could say that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, it's interesting that, that the music helps actors act in a way that nobody realizes.
Right.
So, I mean, the wrong music can make a performance look silly. I mean, it really, it's such a fine line of like how it's perceived. So I think that, music kind of goes hand in hand with the performance of the actors. It creates the tonality, and it really has a strong effect on how things are felt. So
yeah. So are you ever lost? So when you watch like the Joker's not a good example because we've thought, but let's say any other movie where you see a great score, are you often so focused on the score that the not that it takes away from the movie, but you're like, wow, that's a really great piece, and you kind of mentally lose what's happening with the dialogue or the actors. Are you ever lost in that regard because your appreciation? And I know you work a lot, so it's not like you're watching movies all day. I get that too, but are you ever so lost in a musical piece that happens?
I don't know. I mean, I think. every film is so different. It's really hard to. Every project feels really different. I'm always amazed at how you get better at understanding how to make it work, but you also every director and every film is really unique in some way. So it's hard to say. I don't know. That's a tough one to answer. Just in a simple answer.
No, it's a fair answer, and I would see that. But let me ask you. So we get into line a little bit here. So the scene on the tracks for me, the whole last 10 minutes of the movie is just it's scored beautifully throughout. But the last 10 minutes, I feel like, is so driven by the score. It is so beautifully, just put out there. What is it with your rapport with Volker that really makes that work so well? Because you had a quote. And I have to say, it's one of my most favorite quotes I've ever read from a guest. And where you talked about how, and I don't think I have the specifics of it here, but you were talking about how, just scoring the movie, you were very emotional throughout the whole movie, and it was just moving. And I don't know, is it tough for you to do that? Is it, I don't know. To me, it seems.
Well, that film touched me in a way that most films don't. I mean, that film brought up so many things about love and distance, and that I don't know. That film really I felt much more than most films in that way, because there were moments where I was just feeling this film, and they're just such big emotions, and yeah, that one was. There were just moments where I really was touched by the story.
Yeah, you had said there was a lot of tears in making that. I just thought it was just such a genuine, honest moment that you don't also always hear from people. But I mentioned the last 10 minutes that for me it was the train tracks and just hearing that score and just watching these actors just do their things. The kid, is there a scene for you that pushes you over the top as far as emotions? Is there a scene that? And it's probably an unfair question because you scored the entire movie, but is there a scene for you that just kind of does it for you, where it triggers emotion immediately?
I don't know. I mean, I guess the moment when he's reunited with his mom is just like such a powerful moment in the movie, and that was always a really powerful moment to score. Yeah, there was a lot of moments. But yeah, and the main theme, the theme that kind of becomes the main theme of the film, was something that we worked on for a while, but that was more not to picture. It was just more about the emotion of the film and the sentiment of the film, and this idea of being separated from the ones you love and trying to find them. And I think that that's such a metaphor. He is literally lost, from their family, but that feeling of loss is such a powerful thing. It gets translated in so many ways for people, and I think that's why that film resonated with people.
Yeah,
that just sort of true love that you feel for people that is sort of a spiritual, boundless love, and that I think that's what he kind of captured in that movie.
And it's absolutely amazing how the way you guys scored it to how it turned out. It's almost like it fit like a glove, and I feel like that's even an understatement. I mean, it's so amazing how appropriate and beautiful and overwhelming that score is. I mean, I can't tell you that enough, and I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry if I'm gushing.
Thank you very much. No, I haven't heard that in a while from Lion, so it's nice.
No, and I have to say, people think I'm a weirdo. I know it because I'm on a treadmill, I'm watching Lion, I'm appreciating your score, but I'm telling you, man, there's a piece where they're backing away. They're back. It's towards the end of the movie, and your music is playing, and it's, I don't know, like there's no words for it. Like, so when I get away from things, I throw on your music, I throw on Thomas Newman, I throw on some of my favorite composers. What do you do to get away from a long day? Because I know as we're talking now, you're taking a break to talk to me. I know you're going to go back to being busy as hell as you usually are. What do you do to get away from things? What is there music you put on? Do you get away from music? How do you handle that part of it?
Yeah, I mean, it gets harder to listen to music at the end of the day when you've worked on music.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it's interesting. In the morning, I'll sort of, if I have time, or I'll maybe spend a little bit of time listening to, some classical music or something that sort of starts me, and then I'll work. At the end of the day, the only thing that I'm listening to now, strangely, is I got really into old jazz again. But just, I've been buying records. I got this really nice old vinyl player, and it just, the old jazz sounds so good on this vinyl player. So I've sort of gotten back into that. And it's somehow a sort of musical sorbet for the day. It just clears my head. But then I turn it off. I think that I can only handle so much music each day. So sometimes silence is better.
Yeah, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention your award-winning work on Transparent. Phenomenal music there. Is there anything you have coming up, Dustin? Yeah, I've kept you on long enough. I'm so blessed to be able to speak with you today. Thank you for that. Anything coming up? Anything? How can people listen to you? I know you have a website. Anything you want to throw out there?
No, just that. Thank you for anybody who's listening, and it's always appreciated. I think that I feel grateful that I'm able to make music as a living, and it doesn't go unnoticed that's because of people who listen. So thank you. Yeah,
and personally, I just wanted to say, you change a lot of lives with music, and the person at this end of the table is one. And yeah, it sounds like I'm gushing, and I certainly am, but it's sincere and it's honest. And yeah, man, thank you for your life's work. I appreciate it, and I can't wait for what's next for you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.